All right, it is now time for the SEC West preview episode. You should have already listened to the SEC East preview episode that came out earlier this week. If you didn't already, go listen to that episode. If you listen to that episode, you already know who my two guests are for this episode, but just in case you missed it, it is my former co-hosts, maybe future co-hosts. The reunion is in the works. Everybody's loving the SEC East episode, even though we recorded it 5 minutes ago and it hasn't been released. I know people loved it. So it is Mark and Joe. Welcome, even though we've already been recording.
Blake, thank you so much for having us, man. It's been a long time coming. Great to see you again. No, I'm just fucking with you. It's been a great episode thus far. I'm excited to, push through the SEC West and give the people the takes that they need to get through their commutes or long work days.
Yeah, I figured a multiple hour episode would just be too much for people to handle. So we're splitting this up. We're same recording for us, but for you guys, it is a brand new episode. It is the SEC West. The SEC East was full of a lot of South Carolina talk from us. It was full of a lot of how can we possibly stop Georgia from three-peating talk. And
here's a good question. Here's a really, sorry to interject. Is there a South Carolina podcast?
I'm sure there's a bunch of them, but not one that I've ever listened to that's good enough that I would want to keep listening to it.
I'm just kind of thinking about us picking a niche and sprinting down it and thinking how can we make the message boards be our fan? I mean, maybe one of two ideas. One, we could talk all about South Carolina, or we could start a Clemson hate podcast where we just talk
about a bigger audience
about Clemson.
That's a bigger audience.
I think toxic is the way to go.
Toxic would be great. Yeah. We could talk about Howard's Rock and how fucking stupid it is.
People love hate. Hate gets the people riled up.
Gets the clicks.
And yeah, there's only a certain number of South Carolina fans, but every South Carolina fan also hates Clemson. And then there are thousands of other people that also hate Clemson. So I think that's a better niche. But
you bringing up the fact that this is just the beginning is making my podcast juices stir. And I mean, yeah, a Clem Sucks podcast that presented by the Longshot Lock boys, presented by Twos, would be awesome.
Featuring the Blakey Locks show.
And a Capitol rioter Mark Horn.
Yeah, the statute of limitation hasn't passed yet, okay?
Yeah, all right, let's wait.
Shut up.
Let's wait a few years and then
what
get
if
into
Mark
it.
did get investigated for this show? What if they were like, all right, let's run the numbers here?
One of the 50 people that listens to this podcast just happens to be a member of the FBI. It's like, wait, what the fuck?
This is his way to get a promotion.
He's the one that we've been looking for this whole time, the 4chan one.
Especially assuming that FBI agent would then literally be listening to a podcast to get winning bets for his college football gambling habit, and then he's like, "Oh shit, I think I got somebody."
I want a deep voice over my voice. Okay, I don't want my identity out there. I don't want my voice out there. Okay, I need it all privacy.
Yeah, I got bad news, Mark. People will recognize your voice. It is not. I'm sorry, I had to.
It's not my strength.
That is so funny.
I'll blur out your face too. I'll blur out your face.
Yeah.
I'll protect your identity.
That'd be especially funny. Put a censored bar over his eyes,
But only for this one, not for the SEC. The SEC East one, you're already screwed.
Yeah,
no.
The FBI agent who listens is the FBI agent who listens is an Arkansas fan.
Yeah,
you know what? I take back supporting Twos. Delete the app right now to all those that just downloaded it.
Whoa.
Unsubscribe to the Blakey Locks.
Whoa.
I'm cutting that out. That's gonna get cut out.
Bleep it. Just bleep it.
Yeah, it's one long bleep.
Yeah.
But let's get into the teams. We're talking about how Georgia could get stopped from three-peating, and I think one of the best ways they could get stopped is one of these teams in the SEC West beating them in the SEC championship game, and hopefully that could be the thing that keeps them out of the college football playoff. I honestly think there are 4 teams that could win the SEC West. I think it's more open than people maybe think it is.
Who's your
And that
fourth?
obviously,
I'm excited. I'm excited to hear who your fourth
we'll get
is.
into it. Um, Obviously, you have to start with Alabama still. Um, Alabama is not quite the same old Alabama anymore. Georgia has kind of taken over that role as the most dominant team in college football, as that team that kind of just reloads every year. Obviously, Alabama has a ridiculous amount of talent. Um, but even when you look at last year, they had Bryce Young, the best quarterback in the country, the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft. And they didn't even win the SEC West last year. LSU won the SEC West in Brian Kelly's first year, Jaden Daniels' first year at LSU. They won the division. So I think there's probably the most pressure that there has been on Alabama in a really, really long time. Not that Nick Saban is going to get fired. He's going to have that job as long as he wants to be coaching college football. But they are the second favorite behind Georgia, plus 260 to win the conference. They still have a win total of 10. But the big question is, can they hold off LSU and Texas A&M and these other teams that are pretty much catching up to them from where they've been the last few years? And obviously, the most interesting thing this year with Alabama is their massive question mark at the quarterback position. Like I just said, they had Bryce Young. Gibbs is gone. Their running back, Will Anderson, who was the best defensive player in the country, is gone. They now have 2 guys fighting for this QB position. It is Ty Simpson, who is a freshman, and then Jalen Milroe, who did get some action last year, came in as the backup. And when Bryce Young got hurt a couple times, Milroe came in and was not impressive. He's like a ridiculous athlete. He's really fast. He's a very good runner, but he basically can't play the quarterback position. And honestly, they've not named a starter, but the latest word is that Ty Simpson, this kid, is going to be the week 1 starter. When you look at the Alabama wide receiver room, it is still loaded with like 5-star talent, but it's not the wide receiver rooms of Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, like all these
Jalen
guys,
Waddle.
all Jalen Waddle, like all these guys in one wide receiver room. It's not that anymore. There's some questions at the coordinator spot. They ended up hiring Tommy Rees at offensive coordinator from Notre Dame, kind of like late into the hiring process. It was kind of out of nowhere. And Tommy Rees had success at Notre Dame as the offensive coordinator, some success, but he was obviously a Notre Dame guy. And their system is not what Alabama's system is going to be. It's going to be a big jump for him as a coordinator to try to do this, especially with a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of experience. So basically, long story short, I am down on Alabama. I don't think they're going to win the SEC West. I'll get to who my pick is later, but I think there are multiple teams that could easily get after Alabama. I don't think Alabama's going to make the college football playoff, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on them, and questions will be asked about Nick Saban if they don't win the SEC West. Like I said, I don't think there's a world where he gets fired, but the media is going to start to ask a lot of questions if they don't win the West. What do we have on Bama?
I like him to win it. I like him to win it all. I think that Nick Saban is hard to argue with just from a high level perspective. And I think that how they performed last year just leads him to, I mean, like, it almost goes something like this. If they're not very good this year, I think Nick Saban retires. Like, you know, I just can't imagine how that man who has had so much success year over year with the same kind of just hard work and, you know, good recruiting beats all. If they lose to LSU and if they lose to Georgia, I would be shocked. But yeah, obviously LSU is such a dark horse this year because, you know, they started slow last year. They looked really good for the rest of the season. You know, obviously, I don't know. Overall, I like Bama to shock. Again, like it's funny even like doubting Bama. So that's why I don't. Nick Saban. Nick Saban is Nick Saban is Nick Saban. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Mark?
both you guys brought up pressure. The Alabama's in jeopardy of its first 3-year national title drought since Saban has been there. You look at they weren't picked to win the SEC for the first time since 2015, so there's doubters out there. One thing that stands out to me is they are ranked 125 in the country in percentage of returning production, and they're going to have a new quarterback and 2 coordinators. You mentioned Tommy Rees, which I'm actually a fan of. I think he'll do a fine job. One I'm a little concerned about is Kevin Steele. You look at his track record. I think he's gone from 3 different schools the last 3 years. He's never once looked like a guy because you know what? That's the type of guy that can lead a Bama's defense. But at the same time, I am just absolutely torn on what to think of this team. They could easily run the table 12-0, or maybe, a 10-2 season or whatever. But here's one nugget I found pretty interesting. See if I can find it. All right. The last 3 times, 2009, 2012, 2015, they were predicted to not win the SEC. Each time they won the SEC in the national championship. So is this a trend? Do you bet on the trend? I don't know. At the end of the day, I do think 10 wins is a not too low of a number. I think it's pretty spot on. I think they can get to that number at worst.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not a trend. I love that stat, Mark, because obviously what it takes in order for them not to be favored to win means that they would have had to have a bad season the year before. So I think that this is the exact angle that I'm going for. Nick Saban thrives when they actually are underdogs, and I think this year all eyes are on Bama.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be more of a not like the 2009 Bama team where they ran it every play, but I do think they're going to get back to just running the ball down their throats and just focus on not turning over the ball and not making penalties. Last year, they were top 10 in the country, I think, in penalties. I'm sure Saban all year has emphasized on that. So maybe expect to see a more disciplined team.
Well, I think that's what Tommy Rees wants to do. He wants to not be like the Bryce Young Tua Alabama offense. He wants to be the Greg McElroy, Mark Ingram Alabama offense. And it's like just kind of contain the system, run the ball, and just hope that your defense is good enough that you're in every game and you find ways to win. So everything that I said about I'm not in on Alabama, obviously it's completely possible that they go 12-0, they win the SEC, they win the national championship. I'm just not a believer in the quarterback play they're going to have. I'm not a believer in the coordinating hires. I like Tommy Rees, like you said. I just think year one at Alabama with an inexperienced quarterback room is going to be really tough for him to make that transition right away. And I think that their schedule is just ridiculous. Like we've said this about almost every team in the SEC, but I mean, week 2, they're hosting Texas. That game is going to be insane. Texas almost beat them last year. Mm-hmm. That was in Austin, obviously, and this game is now going to be in Tuscaloosa, which helps a lot. But Alabama has way more question marks going into that game than Texas does. Texas has way more of an established quarterback room, established coaches, established roster, top to bottom, in my opinion, than Alabama. And Alabama, if they play their best at home, should definitely win that game. It's like a 7-point spread as of right now, and that probably won't change because both teams are playing terrible teams week 1, so we probably won't be able to get much from that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Texas won that game. If the line stays at 7, I will definitely be betting Texas +7 in that game. I think it'll be really close. And then I think the teams that they're playing in the West, like they have to go to Texas A&M. I think that'll be a really tough game. Ole Miss, that'll be a really tough game. They host Arkansas. That's a tough game. They host Tennessee out of the East. That's a really tough draw out of the East. LSU, obviously, we know how good LSU is going to be. They have to go to Kentucky and to Auburn. Like those are all games that you could easily, if this team is not peak Alabama, you could easily slip up and lose a couple of those games.
You're so right. Like that schedule hearing you reflect on that definitely makes me question my take a little bit. Because it really comes down to the fact that, like, if their quarterback doesn't have Heisman caliber qualities, then you're just going to run into a lot of walls throughout that schedule, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they can go 12-0. Them hosting LSU, we can kind of transition this into talking about LSU, who's the next team. Hosting LSU, I think that's huge. It gives them a big advantage. That's obviously their main competition in the West. LSU won the division last year, and they should be much better than they were last year. Jaden Daniels has a whole nother year. Brian Kelly has a whole nother year. They had the best transfer portal class in the country. They had one of the best recruiting classes in the country. They're going to be ridiculously good. I love this LSU team. I don't know if you guys know this, people that have listened to other episodes of the Blakey Locks show know that I bet LSU to win the national championship. They're one of my couple of teams this year. I think they're 100% the real deal. I think they have two quarterbacks they could win with, Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier. I think if Jaden Daniels is not living up to what they think he could be, I think they could bring in Nussmeier, and he has like a bunch of qualities that Jaden Daniels doesn't have. They return a ridiculous amount of production. I just think this team is going to be loaded. I think they're going to go to Alabama and win that game, and they're going to win the SEC and get into the playoff. And then I think they definitely have the talent to beat anybody else in the college football playoff. So LSU is my team.
I like Jaden Daniels for the Heisman. Obviously, I know that we've got, a potential segment on that later, but he looked really, really good last year after he kind of shook off a couple of the, first games rust. Brian Kelly, man. I mean, first he was doing those awkward photo shoots in the locker room, and then he was winning football games. So there's no reason to believe that he's not gonna. Oh yeah, faking the Southern draw too. That was great. I mean,
he's an easy guy to make fun of, but he wins lots and lots of football games, and he proved year one that he literally went in with a brand new team and won the SEC West. And honestly, offensively, they had a really good game against Georgia in the national championship game. They scored like 35 points or something in that game. They just couldn't get a stop. Mm-hmm. What do you think about LSU, Mark?
No, I'm with you, Blake. I love this team, but I love this team because of Brian Kelly. I might be one of the few people out there that's actually a fan of the guy. You look at his track record. He wins football games. I saw since 2015, he's one of three coaches to win double-digit games every year. And I think one thing that stood out when he was at Notre Dame is that his teams always finish higher in the rankings than they did at the beginning of the year. Every year they say they're overrated, but you can argue that they were actually underrated if they're finishing above their projections. And Joe, you're talking about Jaden Daniels. I saw a media day. He's bulked up to 212 pounds. I think this kid is determined to ball out this year. He's going to be a man amongst boys on the football field. And yeah, I'm with you guys. I really like LSU. They're my pick to win the SEC West. And
we go.
One question. LSU week 10 versus Bama. LSU will be the first team since who, Joe, to beat Bama back-to-back seasons?
First team since South Carolina to beat. No, that's not right.
I love where your head was at.
Well, and don't get me wrong, we did beat them notoriously in 2012, right? And it was the most shocking upset of all time or something like that. Yeah. First team since Ole Miss.
Hell yeah, Joe. That's right.
Wow. Swag Kelly.
Swag Kelly and Bo Wallace.
Taking down the
goalpost.
That's
crazy. The Swag Kelly game is one of the great games of all time.
Oh, yeah. He dropped his nuts on the field.
Yeah. Is that the game where he had the pass get deflected and then he caught it and threw it?
I think that was
threw it again.
Was that Johnny?
Was that Johnny Manziel? That was Johnny Manziel against Alabama. Yeah.
Have you guys watched? I don't know. Maybe. Well, I guess maybe we'll save that for the A&M talk, which is next.
We can do that right now. A&M talk.
Great.
The Johnny Manziel doc. I did watch the Johnny Manziel doc. Honestly, it was good, but I really didn't think there was that much in it that I didn't already know. It was more like, remember how crazy that was? Like, it was
Yeah.
all those, none of those stories were really like news stories, like him going to Vegas when he was on like a Saturday when he was on the Browns, and like the Scooby-Doo Halloween costume and like all that stuff. So it was fun. It was fun to like reminisce on those days. And like at the
Did
end,
they
it was
tell
like,
the story? Did they tell the story? I actually haven't seen it yet. Did they tell the story about how he was like blackout drunk the night before, like a very big game, and they were like, "There's no way we can start him," but then they were like, and then he was like, "No, you're starting me," and
yeah,
it was against Alabama, and then they won. If I'm
yeah,
not mistaken.
I don't remember if it was because the Alabama game was on the road, so I don't think it was the Alabama game. It would have been a
It was like
home
their
game.
first true test. I can't remember who it was against,
Yeah,
but
it
yeah.
was somebody else, I think, but same thing. And they were actually interviewing Cliff Kingsbury, who was his offensive coordinator when he was there. And when they told that story, it was Cliff Kingsbury basically being like, he was like sweat. You could just like smell the alcohol like sweating out of his body. And this is like his like, coach telling this story and being like, dude, like, how are you gonna play? And him just being like, you just gotta trust me. And he's like,
Yeah,
all right. And he sent him out there, and Cliff Kingsbury was like, it was the best fucking game I ever saw him play. Like,
yeah.
just played his lights out. Some guys just have it. Some guys can just do that. One of the great characters in college football history.
And then I've heard
Um,
that like the big pop is at the end of the documentary when it's like, and Johnny Manziel, or like, and yeah, I still struggle with an alcohol problem, like cracks a beer and like, starts
yeah,
chugging it or something
it was him and his
ridiculous.
buddies, like, yeah, like shotgunning beers like halfway through the thing, like in like where they're filming. And yeah, he's talking about how he like still has like addiction issues and like mental health issues, and he like considered like attempting suicide. Like it does get kind of dark, and then you're like, but he's just pounding beers in this interview that he's doing. Johnny fucking football. I don't know what you
Johnny
want me to
fucking
say.
football, man. What a
All
guy.
part of the legend.
Really.
But this year for Texas A&M, it's kind of same old for Texas A&M that we've seen the last couple of years. We hear about how they have one of the best recruiting classes coming in. They have all these great players. Jimbo Fisher, national championship winning head coach. They're only 14-1 to win the SEC. They have the third best or fourth best odds to win. Their win total is 8. Uh, they have a pretty tough schedule. They get South Carolina and Tennessee out of the East, and they have to go to Tennessee. So that's not an easy draw out of the East. They have to go to LSU, who's kind of their main competition for that second team in the West. So it's a tough schedule for them, as it always kind of is going to be. But obviously, the big story with Texas A&M is just that they're the opposite of what we were just saying about Brian Kelly. They get hyped up to be, this could be the year that they beat Bama. This is the year they're going to win the SEC. And then not only do they not do that, they're terrible. They were legitimately terrible football team last year, despite being, I think, top 5, definitely top 10 preseason ranked team last year. And I think the biggest problem is Jimbo Fisher. I think if they have another bad year, he's going to be fired no matter what the payout they have to give him is, because things are just a disaster. They've hired Bobby Petrino, the legendary Bobby Petrino, to be their offensive coordinator this year. And basically in the offseason, Jimbo has made it, Bobby Petrino has a very specific type of offense he likes to run. It's like an air raid, high powered offense. Jimbo's offense that he likes to run is the opposite of that. It's like an old school, antiquated offense. And he's basically been asked in like SEC media days and stuff like that, like, are you going to be calling plays, or is Bobby Petrino going to be calling plays? Is it going to be his system and your system? And Jimbo's basically just kind of thrown all those questions to the side. He's been like, I don't really want to talk about that. And of course, that could just be he doesn't want to give too much away in terms of like a competitive advantage. But we've seen this with Jimbo before. He's basically an egomaniac who cares more about being in control of everything at his program than he does about winning football games and succeeding. So I think if he gives the reins to Petrino and kind of takes a step back and is like, we really need a good team this year, things could actually work out for them this year and they could win some of these games. We've mentioned their name a few times in these schedules of these top teams that they're playing, Tennessee and Alabama and LSU. They could easily play a major role in this conference by upsetting some of those teams. But I think it really comes down to whether or not Jimbo wants to be a psychopath or not.
I agree. Last year was it was the worst offensive coaching performance we'd ever seen in the history of college football with the talent they had. And you got to think to yourself, is he actually going to let Bobby Petrino call the plays? Personally, I don't think so. I think he's going to get in the way, which is why I have doubts about this team. I think if you look at the schedule, I think they do start 5-0, but then I think they'll finish the season not hitting 8 wins. You know, I look at, I think it really just comes down to Jimbo going to call the plays or not, and my gut tells me he's still going to do it, and he's going to screw them over.
I agree. I think the same thing. I think if Bobby Petrino called the plays, they could be a 9 or 10 win team, maybe beat Alabama or LSU or Tennessee even. But I think Jimbo's going to refuse to give up control. They're going to win probably 7 or 8 games, and he's going to get fired.
Yeah. And I like the quarterback a lot, Connor. I think he could be a stud. So, I mean, like I said, it all just comes down to Bobby Petrino.
Joe?
I have a very sadistic opinion of A&M, specifically because of just the massive contract that they gave to Jimbo and like this idea that they're stuck in like a, unsavory position with him. I also just love like how bad they were, or like how they lost the game after that viral video came out of them doing like the hate chant. So like they're just such an easy team to hate. So I obviously am just preying on their downfall. I think that you guys are exactly correct that Jimbo Fisher thinks that he's bigger than the entire program. And so also, I mean, like, having been to College Station, it's one of the worst like football towns I've ever been in my entire life. How could any top athlete want to live in such a place, in such a culture? So that's for these very analytical, statistical, athletic reasons, they're gonna suck.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hate them. I hate their team. I hate their program. Their fan base is so cringy and everything about them's terrible. And so Jimbo's kind of a fitting head coach for them. And yeah, I think he cares more about himself than the team, and it ultimately is going to be their downfall.
Mm-hmm. You guys think the 5-year comparison between him and Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M? He's got a worse record than him.
I 100% believe it. I mean, part of that we can thank Johnny Manziel for why Kevin Sumlin had a better record, because I don't think Kevin Sumlin was doing much. I think it was Cliff Kingsbury calling plays and Johnny Manziel balling out is mostly what it was. But yeah, no, he's not had a successful tenure there at all so far.
No, their best year was a COVID year, and that's an asterisk.
Yeah, it didn't count. But we can keep it moving. I said that I thought there were 4 teams that could win the SEC West, and I meant that. I think that the Ole Miss Rebels and Lane Kiffin, it's a long shot for sure, because those top teams.
You just love Lane Kiffin. You love Joey Freshwater. You're like, I just love this guy's swagger.
Of course I do. He makes me believe that anything is possible. That's what Lane Kiffin does to me. Like, there are football coaches like Jimbo Fisher that make me think everything's going to go wrong and they're going to fail. And then there are football coaches like Lane Kiffin that make me think on any given Saturday against any opponent at any stadium in the country, Lane Kiffin could go beat that team. And I really believe that. And I have talked about why I'm not totally confident in Alabama. I'm definitely not confident in Texas A&M. I obviously really like the LSU team, but that's why I think Ole Miss, there is an outside shot that they could somehow have the perfect season, have everything go their way. If LSU and Alabama and these teams kind of beat up on each other, there's a long, long shot that Ole Miss could pull it off. I did bet Ole Miss over 7.5 wins because I do really like their team. It's Jackson Dart back for year 2. They have one of the best running backs in the country, if not the best running back in the country. When it comes to those teams that we're talking about, like could they somehow finish better than these teams? They get LSU and Texas A&M at home. So those are the 2 teams that they really have to go after if they want a chance of winning this division. They get them both at home. They get Vandy out of the East as one of their games from the East. So there's an automatic win for them. And they return a ton of guys. And they did really well in the transfer portal. And Mark, when we were talking about Alabama, you talked about not liking their defensive coordinator hire. The reason they had to hire a new defensive coordinator is their old defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, took the same job at Ole Miss, which is insane to go from being the defensive coordinator at what you would consider the best program in the country to being still the defensive coordinator at a different program just because you think there's more like movement for you if you can succeed at a place like Ole Miss. So he's going to take the system he ran at Alabama that's been so good and do it at Ole Miss. And I really like their team. I'm betting them over 7.5 wins. I ultimately don't think they could actually win the West, partially just because I love this LSU team so much. But I think them hosting LSU is going to be really dangerous for LSU. Them going to Georgia, I think, could be the game that Georgia gets upset. I think they're going to be one of the most exciting teams to watch.
Did you see Lane Kiffin's hot girlfriend?
That's
And I
another
did see
reason.
that.
Another reason to be on the Ole Miss train.
Yeah. I mean, he's
But
the best.
Very strange move, I would say, on his part to post just a hot girlfriend pic with hashtag National Girlfriend Day. That's like just the most like, hey, I'm not really that concerned about football. I'm more concerned about my buddies knowing about my hot girlfriend.
Hey, it's 2023. You got to be on top of social media. This is how you recruit the kids. This is how you get the 5 stars coming in.
By having a hotter girlfriend than them, Mark? By like being like,
Yes.
yo, I'm banging a hottie?
They say,
Yeah,
yo,
they're going to think
fucks.
he's the man. Yeah, they think he's the man. And I disagree with saying that that's – I think the fact that he literally just like threw up the picture of them and was like hashtag national girlfriend. I think in Lane Kiffin's head, he's like – he saw one person post a girlfriend and he was like, ooh, Lane has an idea. Football season's a month away. I'm not going to really be talking to my girlfriend for the next like 6 months. I throw up this hashtag National Girlfriend Day post and I'm good. I don't need to do anything for a few more months. She's going to love this. She's like in Lane Kiffin's mind where like football is like everything in the world. He thinks that hashtag National Girlfriend Day post just like bought him like 6 months of goodwill with his girlfriend.
Lane kind of seems like the type of fella to go home after a big game and just like take his pants off and be like, get to sucking.
I didn't know where that was going, but I mean, I don't disagree.
I think the craziest part was nobody knew he was dating a 25-year-old former Ole Miss graduate. And he was like, you know what? What's the best way to break the news? National Girlfriend Day.
National Girlfriend Day. Like he literally put it in his calendar, like, you know, like 6 months ago, being like, this is going to be my moment. It makes no sense. It's a very balls on the floor kind of move. I don't know. I mean, Jackson Dart, if we want to talk real sports here.
Real football.
First of all, fantastic last name. Terrible stat line. 20 for 11 in 2022, 9 for 5 in 2021. So he pretty much throws an INT for every 2 touchdowns he throws. That's not how you win football games. Not at all.
Well, it's a good thing they have the #1 rushing offense in the country. They can just pound it, take the ball away from his hands. But like you mentioned, Blake, a lot of production returning. One thing that stood out to me was 4 O-linemen returning, 131 games combined started by them. You just got to love to see that. and the defensive coordinator. I think under Lane Kiffin, he's never had a top 50 defense. With this guy, he's been top 10 every year at Bama. So 7.5 seems a little low, but if all the stars align, it's very plausible to hit the over.
Yeah,
I heard that
Quinshawn Judkins is another great name. That's the name of their running back, Quinshawn Judkins. So it's
that
Jackson
is
Dart,
sick.
Quinshawn Judkins, Joey Freshwater. I think it's a recipe for a big year.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like you're starting to sell me with these names. Quinshawn Judkins is like that guy runs hard.
He runs people over. Yeah, the fuck over.
Yeah, that's sick.
I'll say one thing, looking at the schedule, I think it'll be opposite of last year where they started 7-0 and kind of faltered towards the end. I think this year they could start 2-3, 3-2, and then I can just see them run the table, maybe take one L to Georgia, and then finish 9-3.
Yeah. No, I think they should have a really solid year. It'll come down to whether they can pull off an upset of a Georgia or an LSU or an Alabama to make the season really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on to Arkansas, they are like 100-1 to win the conference. It takes a pretty big drop off after Ole Miss. Their win total 6.5. Talking about electric running games, after Ole Miss, they might have the second best running game in the country. Obviously, their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, comes back, who is just like a bowling ball of a quarterback. He just runs people over. And then they have Rocket Sanders at running back, who, another great name. Him and Judkins are the two best running backs in this conference. KJ Jefferson, basically, I think Arkansas's season just comes down to how healthy can KJ Jefferson be. Because what we saw last year at the beginning of the season, for us, unfortunately, South Carolina played them at the beginning of the season when they were totally healthy. And they kind of just ran over everybody and they were winning games. And then KJ Jefferson just gets banged up after kind of a long season of the way he plays. And then they just were not even close to the same team down the stretch. So it's a team I like. But I think they're probably just going to go as far as KJ Jefferson's health can take them. Mark, do you have anything on the Razorbacks?
It's hard to get excited about the Razorbacks when they're in the SEC West. You know, some years where you get excited and then they get on a 3-game losing streak because they got to play Alabama, LSU, A&M. But they're a fun team to root for in the West. You got to love the coach. But I really don't have much else to say other than rest in peace, Collins. He was a great fantasy quarterback. You know, tragic. Maybe there'll be a little inspiration this year for them.
And Blakey Locks, you missed an all-time name in cornerback Lorando Johnson. Obviously, his regular name isn't what excites me. It's his nickname, Snacks, with an X. Your boy read a little article on the onlines, Snacks. He got that name for eating a bag of hot Cheetos out of his gym bag his freshman year at Baylor. So just picture a, 200, and, maybe I guess 180 pound dude just reaching into his gym bag and pulling out hot Cheetos and getting the nickname Snacks. I mean, like, that's just an electric factory. So I really like Arkansas's head coach. I really like just the, momentum I think that they're bringing in from last year. I like the over 6.5. Yeah, for all the reasons that you guys have emphasized and some.
Yeah, I think if KJ Jefferson's healthy, they could definitely go over that 6.5 wins. I don't think they're going to beat Alabama or LSU, and that's pretty much it. I think any other game on their schedule, they theoretically could win if they play their best games. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they should be interesting team to watch. Moving on to Auburn. It's obviously a big year for Auburn. They hired Hugh Freeze in the offseason, maybe the biggest head coaching hire of the offseason. Hugh Freeze basically is a guy maybe morally has a lot of issues, but he he wins football games everywhere he goes. And at the end of the day, in this sport, that's the only thing that matters. I think it will be a bit of a rebuilding year for them. Hugh Freeze is obviously a guy. If they're bad this year, nobody at Ole Miss or at Auburn is going to be upset with him. They know it's a long rebuild if they want to be back to where Auburn should be. So I think it's going to be a bit of a slow rebuilding year. Their quarterback is either going to be Robbie Ashford, who was the quarterback last year, or Peyton Thorne, who transferred in from Michigan State, which neither one of those guys really blows me away. They would be a pretty average quarterback. So I don't have much on Auburn. I think Hugh Freeze is obviously a great hire if you want to win football games. But I think it's going to be a rebuilding year for them. So maybe towards the second half of the season, we see them start to get better. Maybe by that Iron Bowl, the last game of the season, they finally have put things together and are ready to pull off the big upset and get momentum into year two. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think the best thing Hugh Freeze did, or the first move he made, was bringing back Cadillac Williams. He kind of sparked a little run at the end of the Auburn season last year, and I think that helped kept the locker room together and kept the players from transferring. So I think that was the smartest thing he did. But like you said, it's going to be a rebuilding year. But the best thing for him is that he does get to play Alabama the last game of the year. He gets to build his offense, build his players. But I honestly have no idea what to expect. They could shock the world and go 9 wins, or they could go 3-9.
Losing Tank Bigsby to the Jaguars was the worst thing to happen to that team from not only a name perspective, but from a talent perspective. I watched the preseason game and he had a 33-yard rush. And so that is about the extent of my knowledge around Auburn's football program besides Hugh Freeze. And as you said, Blake, you got to love it how, no win, lose, drunken slob or not. If you win football games, you're going to have a, job in the NCAA somewhere, somehow. And, for all intents and purposes, a pretty good one at that.
Yeah. All you have to do is take one rehab assignment at a small school. You win some games there. And then the next SEC team with an opening calls and says, all right, we're ready. You can come back. People are over it now. You can come
I'm a
back
changed
to the SEC.
man.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, it's really easy to teach an old dog new tricks.
Oh, you went to the most Christian university in the country, Liberty University.
Yeah.
So he went to become one with God.
He went to a school that made the same mistakes that he made, so they were both able to walk the same path and redeem themselves.
They both learned that it's the best trick that has ever been pulled is you can have any kind of behavior you want and then just say that you're asking for forgiveness from God and you're pursuing religion, and people will just be like, I think he's a different God. I mean, he's gotten forgiveness from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Who are we to hold judgment if he's gotten forgiveness there?
People forget God cures all sins.
Exactly. It's quite the deal.
Is a fan of college football.
Of course he is.
Those two things go hand in hand.
Come on.
Yeah, they do.
Can y'all believe we're talking about football right now? Like, I mean, it is such a long, arduous drought, and now we're just about to be absolute pieces of shit all day, every day. I mean, when
5 months,
I literally schedule all of my entertainment and livelihood around whether or not there's a football game in prime time that night. Like, that's it. I don't care who's playing in it. I bought a ticket to a football game that I had no intention of going to just because we were talking about it on the Longshot Locks podcast. I'm sorry, Blakey Locks show. I'm having a little bit of having withdrawals.
Yo, where's your seat? Where are you sitting?
Oh God, I'm flying Frontier, and I click through all of those options. I say no carry on, no bag select, spit on me when I walk on the plane, as long as it's $19 round trip.
Oh, you son of a
Beautiful.
bitch.
That's how it is.
We have one more team to talk about. The worst team in the SEC West, Mississippi State. obviously, first thing you got to say is RIP to Mike Leach, one of the
RIP.
great characters, not just football coaches, but characters in the history of college football. College football won't be the same without him this year. And this Mississippi State team will definitely not be the same without him. I think it's going to be a pretty tough road for them. Zach Arnett is their new head coach. He does not have any head coaching experience. I think he's going to be in for a bit of a rude awakening, being the new guy on the block in the SEC. They bring Will Rogers back at QB, and I hope for the spirit of Mike Leach's sake, this team finds a way to pull off like one crazy upset win that we can all be like, that was for Mike Leach, and have that be one of the coolest moments of the college football season if that does happen. Unfortunately, I don't think it will happen. I don't think this team's very good. I'm betting their win total under 6.5 wins. Really, the only thing they have going for them is Will Rogers, and they've already said that they're going to be implementing an entirely new offensive scheme than Will Rogers has been playing in his entire career. So despite his experience, he's going to be basically starting from scratch. So I'm down on Mississippi State, and I hope they get one for Mike Leach, and that's about it.
Isn't it so horribly embarrassing that Mississippi State far and away is the worst team in the SEC West, yet they have a higher win total or the same win total as South Carolina in the SEC East?
Yeah. Part of that is they have terrible out of conference schedule, whereas we played UNC and Clemson out of conference.
That's very true. God hates Cox.
Not
Only
this
when
year,
there's
baby.
multiple. When there's one of them, it's okay.
Ooh,
One cock. Yeah,
touche.
that's true. That is
He
true.
hates Cox.
Drop the S.
Cox. And unfortunate for us, we are the Cox, not the cock. It'd be kind of cool if we were the Gamecock.
Well, there is one.
There is
Singular
one
Gamecock.
Gamecock. Have we renamed Sir Big Spur again this year?
I don't know. Is he the Cock Commander yet?
Cock
That's all I wanna know.
Commander.
If we name him Cock Commander, we'll never lose a football game.
Literally.
No.
I don't make the rules. I
He'll be-
just support the Cock Commander,
He'll be flying in mid game and just taking out players' eyes.
which is conveniently also the kind of porn that I like.
I think we've been recording too long. I think we gotta
Now we're
get
getting
into our.
Hey, I'm here to bring the, the action, the energy to the Blakey Locks show. I don't get invited on many podcasts nowadays, so I'm here to say the things that I can't say in private. I only can say these things in public.
No, that's totally fair. But we should get into our kind of final segment, which is just kind of the big picture. We've been recording for basically like 2 hours.
Which is funny, by the way. We do need to briefly touch on that. Like, shout out all of your like seasoned podcast veterans who make 2-hour episodes 3 times a week consistently. Like, this is hard. This is hard to keep the energy up, and they do it at like all hours of the night. There must be like some kind of level, there has to be like an energy drink, like, abuse problem in the podcasting industry, because it's only been 2 hours, but it feels like it's been 2 days.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
It's the hardest job in the world, podcasting.
People don't give it enough respect.
But to wrap up, we're all going to kind of give out our final picks for the conference, kind of go over what our favorite bets were that we've talked about throughout these last 2 hours. So we'll start with this. Everybody can give their SEC championship matchup and winner. And we'll start with you, Mark.
I'm going to go with Georgia versus LSU in the finals. And it's going to be LSU overtime over Georgia. Both teams going to the playoffs.
I'll say before, since I actually have the exact same prediction, I have LSU over Georgia in the SEC championship game. Joe, you've already given your pick, but let's hear it again.
UGA, Bama.
Down
Crimson
goes
Tide
Georgia.
taking their conference back.
Crimson Tide. I mean,
None
Mark,
of us
that
picking
stat,
Georgia.
I'm writing that stat down, Mark. I'm writing the stat down that you said, which just gets me so juiced up. Whenever they're not expected to win the SEC, they not only win the SEC, but they also win the national championship.
Yeah. I mean, that was crazy.
So I'll go one level further. UGA versus Bama. Bama wins. Bama also wins the national championship.
Okay.
What are those odds?
And I think LSU also wins the national championship.
Okay.
So there we go.
What are the odds of a Bama natty?
I don't know.
I'm
You
hoping
can look
for
it up
more
while
than... Yeah, I got it.
Oh, Joe.
What do you think it is, though, Blake?
like
5-1?
plus like 700,
600.
600.
600. LSU is 1,200, so you guys can get some pretty juicy odds if you're looking for it.
I bet it at 28-1 in February.
Sheesh.
I'm already have like a cash out option that was like double my bet amount, but we're not taking
sick.
that.
No,
pretty
we
sick.
not.
Well, you do. I
No,
mean, like,
there's
that
a reason they want me to cash out so bad because they know it's going to win.
That FSU game is going to be very telling, very fast.
No, it should be awesome.
Yeah.
It's going to be an unbelievable game. But so national championship picks, we just kind of talked about that. Anybody like any Heisman bets from the SEC?
Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, you said Jaden Daniels. It's I mean, he's when you're looking at Heisman bets, basically it has to be a quarterback if we're being realistic, and it has to be a team that can be at least right there in the college football playoff mix in the last like week or two of the season. Preferably a team that is going to be playing a conference championship game because the votes come in the day after those conference championship games. So that's obviously a guy to look at. Mark, do you have anybody from this conference that you like for the Heisman?
I mean, I do like Alabama's running back McLennan, and if they are gonna run the table this year, he would be a very large reason why Bama is back. But like you said, it's normally quarterbacks. But I'm gonna go with the sleeper. I'm gonna go with him. I think he'll rush another 1,500 yards, maybe add 20 TDs with it. And if they go 12-0, he'll be the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I can't hate the value. The only Heisman bet that I'm making out of the SEC is a guy who is not a starting quarterback. It is a guy that I briefly mentioned earlier. That is the LSU backup quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier. He's 100-1 to win the Heisman. I think this LSU team is so good that no matter who is their quarterback, they could easily be competing for a national championship. And you did talk about Jaden Daniels did put on a lot of weight, which I think is going to be really good for him. But the way he plays, honestly, is capable of getting hurt at any point. And Garrett Nussmeier is not far behind. He's played in plenty of games for LSU before, and he's done well. I think there's a chance he could get that job at some point, whether Jaden Daniels is just not doing enough or if there's injury issues. And I think 100-1 is worth it for a guy that, if he comes in the first couple of games, could easily put up the numbers to warrant a Heisman Trophy.
It's a lovely hot take.
Yeah, betting a backup quarterback to win the Heisman is just...
It's a lovely go fuck yourself, Joe.
It is.
Yeah,
it really is. It's a...
Sometimes you just...
Hey, Twos Joe, I thought about you and your notes, and I just thought, you know what? Not only am I not going to go with a starting quarterback in a different team, I'm going to go with the guy right behind your guy. Your guy is so bad that he's going to get benched for my guy.
No, the point is your guy is such a perfect pick because of the situation he's in, but I'm getting a guy that, if given the opportunity, could probably do the exact same thing, but his odds are 100-1 instead of like 18-1 or whatever. So no, it's the quarterback of LSU is the right pick. I'm just taking the chance on something bad happening and me getting the guy at 100-1. But just to go back over the win total bets one more time, The win total bets that I took were Tennessee under 9 wins, Ole Miss over 7.5 wins. I
Which
like
again,
Joe.
you only are taking because you like Joey Freshwater, but continue.
That's right. Joe sold me. I'm in on over 6.5 wins for Arkansas. I'm taking the Razorbacks. I'm betting that KJ Jefferson will stay healthy. Under 6.5 wins for Mississippi State and under 5.5 wins for the Florida Gators. And that under 5.5 for
Wow.
Florida would be my favorite of all of those if you're only to bet
Wow.
one.
Wow. My favorite win total bet for this season is North Carolina under 8.5. I think Drake May is the biggest fraud in all of college football. I hope that they display their lack of toughness in the South Carolina game, where they just fold to the, rigid SEC guys that we have. You guys have obviously heard my impression on Alabama. I love their over 10.5. And obviously I wouldn't be a, completely blindly ignorant Gamecock if I didn't take South Carolina over 6.5, especially if I'm taking North Carolina under 8.5.
They should go hand in hand. I think if South Carolina wins week 1, they will definitely go over that 6.5. And if North Carolina loses, they're in trouble. So
that's exactly what I'm crossing my fingers and my toes on.
Mark?
Beamer has never let us down on the over, so I'll take the over. I will be hating myself first week of November, saying there's no way it's going to happen, and then he'll magically pull off 3 wins to hit the over. And then I'm going to take the under in Florida. I'm taking the over in Ole Miss. I'm going to take the over in Bama.
All right, guys, look at this. There's a lot of college football teams, but I feel like we're doing. Oh, and I guess this was an SEC preview, so the fact that I'm taking North Carolina under 8.5 is a little bit.
They're playing an SEC team, and they're playing an SEC team in College Game Day, week 1. It's worth bringing it up.
Exactly.
But I guess that's it. We've hit everything. We've gone 2 hours, over 2 hours, talking about all these SEC teams. It's been great to get the band back together. Hopefully people have enjoyed this episode. And we're definitely going to have to do it again. We're going to have to talk off mic about the potentials of what could be from this group getting back together. But certainly there will be another episode with this group during the football season. Maybe more than one, definitely one. That's what I'm willing to guarantee at this moment, is there will be another episode with this group.
Except for if the FBI agent finally gets track of Mark and locks him up where he belongs.
Yeah. And then Joe and I will still do it, just so you know, Mark, if that happens.
We definitely will. Honestly, you should call us. We'll put the phone right next to the microphone, and we'll press 0 to accept.
To the one FBI agent that's listening, I was actually out of town on January 6th, so
I was just email. Yeah, out of town. Where in the Washington D.C. area, Mark? Because I'm pretty sure you don't. You don't live. Do you live within 20 minutes of D.C.?
I live in Northwest.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. Wait. I do not live in DC. Let's retract that. But yeah, this podcast felt like 2.5 hours for Blake, but it felt like 3.5 for Joe and I, because we were mentally prepared at 7:30, ready to roll, ready to hit some bets. But hey, it's all good. It's all good.
No, I this group will definitely get back together. We will definitely have more personal vendettas against one another. We'll definitely have more inappropriate comments to be made. And the only way that we can know if it is successful is if the people leave a 5-star review and share it on their socials. It also would be very, very funny to me if Blake did not actually put out any of these episodes ever. He just wanted to chat with the boys. And he just puts on a whole podcast facade for us to just chat it up, and we do the intros and the outros and all that.
I mean, it would be worth it. I would do this whether it was recording or not. It's great to talk football with the boys. We're only I guess like 12 days away from college football being played. So it's crazy. It's almost here. If you're still listening after 2.5 hours of SEC talk, you're a great person, a great football fan. We appreciate you listening. Make sure uh, make sure you download the Twos app, who presented these SEC episodes. And yeah, like Joe said, leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify. If you're listening on YouTube, like it, leave a comment with your favorite bet, and tap into the description to download the Twos app. And other than that, I think that's it for us.
Remember, the more you bet, the more you win.